My name is Ryan Cortez, and I've been studying here at UAS for the past 4 years. Originally from Puerto Rico, um, but a bunch of different events in my life have led me here. And I think it's interesting throughout this class. One thing that I learned is it's interesting how all your past events lead you up to this one point, and that's one thing that this class really brought out for me. I didn't really think about it before, but it's just interesting to think about. Um, Yeah, I've been the photographer for the PR department at the university for the past 3.5 years, and it's been a great experience to kind of be involved with the media crew and try to help sell this university, a place that I've learned so much from. And mine is the art of impulse, so here we go. All right, from a young age, um, my father was always taking us across the world. He was in the military, and he used that to his advantage to give my mom, my sister, and I, the family that his dad, the life that his dad couldn't afford to give him. So he would take us all across on these military privileged flights, and we'd travel all over. And throughout all these trips, we'd always be snapping photos of all our trips to kind of hold on to these memories. And none of my family were artists at all. My dad, like I said, was in the military. My mom was a stay-at-home mom and sometimes a secretary. But throughout the hundreds and hundreds of photos we gathered over years of traveling and just growing up, we ended up having these really special photos that I still hold dear to me till this day. And in a way, I think this is how I first initially got interested in photography. Just this whole idea of capturing your past experiences and being able to relive them and share them with other people. Ever since I was a young kid, just like any other kid, really, I was always on the move. Like never could stay still. And as I grew up, a lot of my neighborhood buddies kind of they grew out of that whole thing. But even still today, I'm still like that. I can't stand still for more than 2 minutes, and I always find myself trying to be on the move, which was really lucky for me that I was able to grow up in such a beautiful place, such a sunny place, and uh, it's called Aguadilla, Puerto Rico, and I grew up right there on the northwest coast in that left-hand corner up there in the map, and this area allowed me for to be involved with different experiences that maybe some of you have never been able to be a part of. But one thing that I really hung on to and became a big part of my life, an activity that became a big part of my life, was surfing. I spent the last 4.5 years surfing pretty much every day, maybe twice a day, whether there was no waves or whether they were way too big for me to be out there. And I just loved how with surfing you're not having to think, you're just constantly reacting to situation that's right in front of you. And I really like that because I could just I could just indulge myself in this whole, it was almost like a meditation through movement. You're not really thinking, you could clear your mind completely and just react to the wave. It's always changing. So I really liked that about surfing. And when I wasn't surfing, I was skateboarding. And one thing that I also liked about skateboarding was just how it allowed me to just react to my environment. It had this really physical quality to it. There'd be a object that I'd want to drop off, or like a rail that I'd want to grind down, and mentally I'd be afraid, but after a while it's like, okay, I could do this, so that kind of built up this kind of idea in my head that whatever kind of process I wanted to face, I could do it if I just put my mind to it and just think positive. And this also stayed with me for a long time. And about the age of 15, I started playing a lot of music, and as just with skateboarding and surfing, it allowed for me to live in the moment, and it was a really physical process, and it was a really in the moment process as well. And I really liked that, and I thought that I've written 12 songs. Maybe I'll just start studying music. So I went to Berkeley in Boston. I flew up there with my father to audition as a percussionist. I loved playing percussion and guitar, but I figured I could read music, so I tried out, and I got in. I don't know how. I think during the solo I broke into some George of the Jungle groove or something, but they they liked it enough to allow me to go in there. But then I kind of thought about it for a while, and I was like, is music something that I want to do with my life? You know, do I want to be stuck to something that I usually just do for fun? So I backed out of that, and well, something really interesting happened. A year later, after this, I was just sitting in this courtyard, and I saw this kid kind of kneeling by the ground, and he had this little box next to him, and I walked up. I wasn't doing anything, and I was like, what is that? I'm like, what are you doing? He said, I'm capturing light. And I was like, what do you mean? He's like, it's a little pinhole camera. You basically uncover this little piece of duct tape. It was a shoebox, really primitive stuff, and there's film on the inside. I don't understand the mechanics of it necessarily, but basically you let the duct tape out, you let light in for an exposure, and then you cover it back up, and that's as much light as is allowed in the film. And I'm like, wow, this is such an interesting process. All you have is this little box, and you're capturing light. And he's like, yeah, I love it. I get to, take pictures of what's around me and remember it for later. And I was like, that's interesting. I was like, can you take pictures of people moving? He said, no. The exposure is so slow. It's just blurred. So everything has to be really still. And I was like, well, my life's too fast. So screw the whole pinhole idea. I think I'm going to get a digital camera. So I worked at this pizza place, killed myself first time working in a kitchen, and eventually was able to get a camera. And this was like a big pivotal moment in my life. I took a trip right after I had purchased the camera to go visit my folks. They now are living in Washington, D.C. And whereas before my mom and my dad were the ones that were taking photos and getting to capture our memories and choose what memories we were going to have to talk about later. Now it was in my hands. I had my own camera. I could take pictures of exactly the memories that I wanted to hold on to. And this was really, really fun for me. I also really enjoyed how you can, just with one snapshot, take two pictures and juxtapose them together, and you create this story. You have two elements, two photos, but when you put them side by side, that area in between is kind of like your own interpretation, the audience's interpretation of the piece. So this is just a really fun time for me, just figuring this out, all the different processes. And I didn't know much about composition or really how to set certain exposures. I was always taking pictures in auto, so I started taking classes at the university with Dave Gillot, and that was really fun. He taught us a lot about post-processing and being able to make the most out of our digital cameras, experimenting a lot with these different exposures, long exposures, different forms of cropping, and all sorts of things like that, and started really thinking about composition. So I was all over the place. I was all over the place really with what I was taking pictures of. I wasn't really necessarily documenting sometimes I'd stage things or whatever. But I was always really interested in diagonal lines and the dynamism that they could throw into a still photograph. And around this time, I figured I'd been taking pictures for like 5 months, so I applied for a job at the university. They were looking for a photography intern, and this was a wake-up call for me because, as I said earlier, I was really all over the place and was always trying to be really, avant-garde and have a lot of diagonals and these complicated pictures. And basically the crew told me, we need something that's bold and simple. Like, I would take, let's say, 500 photos, and out of those 500 pictures, Allison, the graphic designer, would choose the 3 simplest images. So I was like, okay, so I don't really have to think too much. But in a way, after a while, I got bored with that. And I was like, how can I satisfy myself as an artist and satisfy my boss and the graphic designer with being able to capture really simple and bold images? So that was my quest from then on. And through working with the university with Katie Bosler, I was able to document this really important event, the raising of the Eagle Pole here on campus. And this was like my first time being on assignment of actually documenting a cultural event, and I felt privileged to be able to, retell the story for people later on down the road who maybe weren't there, or people who were there and who want to relive that and have. Oh, it's all right, Katie. Don't worry about it. Uh, and I'm trying to keep things as simple and bold as possible. Still trying to throw in my diagonal lines that I love so much, but do so in a way that is more thought out and compositionally pleasing. And with that event, that sparked this whole idea in me that what I want to do is document. I just want to document my life around me. So I'm not interested in staging things with my photography and my artwork like that. I'm into just capturing. This is a photo I took at a liquor shack my dad and I went to in Puerto Rico. He didn't want me to take a picture of him, so I pretended to point right in the middle of his store and then just turned the wide-angle lens on him. So maybe a little unethical, but I got the shot. He didn't seem too hurt by it. And being that I was documenting the life around me, a big part of that was skateboarding. And I don't know why, but after a while, it was like I was almost having as much fun skateboarding or taking photos of my friends skateboarding as I was skateboarding myself. I mean, I usually only take out the camera when someone's doing some things that are much better than I, because if not, I'd much rather just be skateboarding with that person. But if someone's really has really good creative style and has good technical skill, I love taking out the camera, and it became almost like this mission aspect. And I couldn't really explain it until recently. I was researching this photographer, Henry Cartier-Bresson, and he had this theory where he's like every life situation has a decisive moment, and he's like that's kind of like the moment that could tell the whole story in one image. So here he's describing it in this photo behind the Gare Saint Lazare. Had he taken it a second later, the guy would have landed in the water. The ripples would have complicated the whole composition. Had he taken it a second earlier, there wouldn't have been such a dynamism and like this, I don't know, almost vibration between the man and the silhouette. There's this tension there. And so I figured that explains it. That's why I like taking photos of skateboarding so much. It's if you take the picture too early, the guy doesn't look like he's doing anything at all. If you take it too late and he's rolling away, no one knows he did anything. So it was almost like this game where I'm trying to capture this perfect, decisive moment. And one thing I was also interested in is pulling back and being able to tell a story, not so much just get under the skateboarder and crop him out of the whole scene. I kind of wanted to give an environment that these people were interacting with. And one thing I love about this photo is that even though this trick it should be the main focus, in a way, by pulling back, I felt like I was able to tell a full story of this was us traveling around the whole island. We traveled for like 6 hours that day just shooting photos of these 3 skaters, and it was such a great opportunity for me. Actually, this last photo was published in this interview that I was able to do and take the photos for of these 2 brothers, one of my 2 best friends growing up in Puerto Rico, and the article was ran in a surfing and skateboarding publication there on the island just this last winter. Okay, with photography, I was able to satisfy my wanting to be spontaneous, but I was missing something. I was missing the physical aspect that I got out of activities such as skateboarding and surfing. So I enrolled in Pedar Dalthorpe's sculpture class, and this was really exciting for me. And soon after, I met my good friend Cal Giordano, and as a boat mechanic, it was really inspiring, his whole mentality behind things, because he always believes that for every problem you have, there's at least 3 possible solutions for how to fix it. This is just something that he has to embrace because he's a boat mechanic and people rely on him to get their stuff working. So I would throw up the most outlandish ideas and he would just say, yeah, go for it, man, we can figure that out. So kind of referencing my musical background, I wanted to try to make an interactive sculpture that people could kind of get inside my head. This is me pedaling, moving as fast as I can, and I would often, when I take these bicycle rides, I get so tuned out. I could hear the rhythm of the spokes, hear the rhythm of the breeze, and just put all these different layers on until I'm like singing a song in my head. And so this is what I wanted to recreate with this bike-powered music machine. Have anyone who wanted to get on and be able to kind of get into my psyche as I'm speeding down a highway. And again, I couldn't have made this without Cal. I had the idea, but my sketches were horrendous, and yeah, it was fun. I got through this huge sculptural interactive stuff. I was able to bring physical into my artwork, which was really fun. And after that, I really liked how the general public could be involved with my artwork and interact with it. And I really like this idea of making music, so inspired by a local phenomenon known as the Taku Winds, I created these chimes. I was walking home from downtown, and the winds were making the whole town a wind chime. You know, metal signs sound like they were going to rip off, so I was like, I got something for you, wind. I think I'll make you some big old wind chimes you can blow around. And here's a video of the installation. So this was my first attempt at trying to document a sculptural work in order to, well, first the whole idea was to share it with my mom. She wasn't able to come check it out, so I took it for her mainly and then put it online and realized that if you document your work, you can share it with such a larger audience, you know, with technology like the internet. It's just great. And needless to say, after that winter in the Taku wind chimes, I was missing home pretty bad. And I often found myself walking down to Auk Rec to go kind of just stare at these little ripples and dream myself into the size of an ant and be able to surf. So with that in mind, I kind of wanted to create, I was looking for what to create next. And with this inspiration and kind of being homesick, I decided to try and create a series of handmade, hand-carved no boards, which are basically bindingless snowboards that you can ride in powder. And it's pretty, I've heard it's the closest thing you can get to surfing in the snow. So I was really inspired to try to be able to interact with the new environment in a similar way than I had in the past. And with this project, I limited myself to really just basic tools, a block planer and sandpaper and I think a jigsaw. It was really fun. And growing up as a skateboarder and surfer, I watched a lot of movies, a lot of films kind of documenting the sport, and I realized fairly early on that there were certain aspects of some movies that would keep my attention for more than just one or two viewings, and a lot of that had to do with storytelling. If a skateboard movie just had action shots, I'd watch it twice and grow tired of it pretty quickly. So this film by Taylor Steele called Hollowed Ground was really inspiring because even though he had action shots and these amazing athletes, he was letting them tell their stories and trying to document it in a very non-intrusive way. And that inspired me to create this work called Rites of Winter. It was a collaborative project with Anna Engi. And here's an excerpt from that. And the athlete's name is Jesse West.
I know the story as well as I wish I could, but Sig Olsen, an old Eagle fan, I think he passed away a couple weeks ago. I'm not sure positive on that, but he was up here every day, spreading super stoked all the time. He's got a bunch of like poems and stuff all over town, and just bed and cow. I actually got one at my house. But my mom he's up for a garage sale of his, and he was but
Oops. One thing I'm excited on, so I've been doing a lot of photography and sculptural stuff, and I thought I was being really spontaneous and impulsive with my photography before, but I don't think it was so impulsive because I'm actually making a conscious decision to grab my camera before I leave, and I'm now on a mission to go find these spontaneous moments, you know? So now with the use of camera phones, I can actually be completely impulsive in my wanting to capture photos. I can just walk out the house, and if something strikes me, a situation strikes me that I just want to document and hold on to, then I can do that now. I can just take out my phone. You know, it's so simple, and right there I have this. In a way, this is my pinhole. You know, it doesn't have any fancy exposure settings or anything like that. All I'm doing, it's not even a box either. It's this little sliver, and I'm just clicking a button. It's like covering up, like taking off this tape and just capturing a little bit of light, and that's all I have. And I think it's like a really valuable tool as a photographer and as an artist, and I recommend it to anybody. You know, you don't have all these settings to worry about. All you think about is composition, and I think that's a really exciting thing for me right now that I'm experimenting with. Just recently I had a show with my now really good friend David Woody, and we both together. It was my work, but we both put the show on. It was both of our shows, and it was a really great experience. The first night, my mom had traveled all the way from Florida and cooked up a bunch of Puerto Rican food and totally took over the show. I think there was like at one point there was 40 people in the back room eating her food and like 2 people in the gallery. So after everyone walked out, it was just a really fun experience to have, you know, little 4-year-old children being able to jump on the bike sculpture, which we somehow dragged through there, and you know, friends that I have from skateboarding or snowboarding, just being able to go into the gallery. I know that a lot of them, it was their first time going into a gallery, and to be able to bring in such a wide audience, I think was something that was really exciting for me, making art that is approachable to anybody, really. And I think that has to do with just trying to keep things simple and bold and spontaneous. Has a lot to do with that. Everyone can relate to being spontaneous. The last day, we actually had a band come in, and I had a little movie premiere, and it was a really fun time. So I think that's something else that I'd like to explore. Not only putting on these exhibits, but putting on events where people could come together and just have a good time and just appreciate art for what it is, just something that anyone could have in their life. And this next semester, I'm finishing up my first screenplay for a feature-length film. I'm gonna film it and direct it, and I already got half the cast, and that's my next project. It's called 214, and it's a film adaptation of a noir novel written by Jean-Patrick Manchette called Three to Kill. It's this gruesome story of a vicious cycle of consumerism and drug use, so it should be really fun. And with that said, thank you for making it out.